sometimes, you know, because we're intuitive, because we're empaths, because we're highly sensitive, because we have that kind of like sixth sense, we are almost, it's almost like the vision is more natural maybe than most. And so then we start to take it for granted. We see these visions and then we're like, we kind of get excited and maybe we even talk about it and maybe we even journal about it, maybe we even write it. But then we go back into the mundane that puts us back into the survival mode. And all of a sudden, we kind of don't really accept that that vision, that dream, is an actual potential, right? Like before you started doing what you're doing for decades, you were at this point where you're like, ooh, I want to study that. I want to study psychotherapy. I want to study, fitness. I want to study shamanic healing journeys. Like you don't necessarily study that. You kind of got called to that. I want to study music therapy. Like there's something that compels you. And then all of a sudden you look back and you're like, oh my God, look at it. Like what just happened there, right? So now we're kind of at this point and we sometimes now have the next version and dimension of our reality. And we're like, we don't necessarily want to take it seriously because we've worked so hard to get to where we are, damn it. And we're like, wait a minute, I'm not going to F this up. This is my certainty. This is my bread and butter, right? And the way I work with my clients is this is not about like sweeping the whole thing and changing the whole thing. Just because it's a big vision, it doesn't mean that the elements of the vision are not already existing. It's just that some things in the existing business that we're practicing can evolve. Okay, there's some levers that can shift. Yeah. Okay, even before you started studying whatever it is you do on a full-time basis, you know that it was a kind of already there. Like as a child, maybe you always spoke to fairies. Maybe you always can hear people's thoughts. Maybe you always can feel the energy of others. Like it was already there. Okay, and so same thing in your current reality. Something is there, and then something is also a potential. Yeah. So now, let's say sometimes also what happens is we don't necessarily realize the expertise that we have built, right? We have now achieved that goal that we are now the experts. Okay, I see this all the time, especially if we're ambitious and we're high achievers and we love to learn. We have the vision, and the mistake that entrepreneurs do is we have the vision and we're thinking, okay, so to get to that, let me take more certifications. Let me take more, let me really work on this thing for like a whole other year. Let me really like journal about it, right? And we think we have to put all this effort in developing our expertise to get to that place. But the reality is, I think a lot of us, because we've been so used to the learning journey, the healing journey, the transformation journey, we don't realize that you have already arrived. You are the expert. You are already good. Okay, let me know, answer this very kind of honestly. You're good at what you do, right? There's no question about that. So sometimes what happens is we get confused between what we do and we continue to promote that and we forget, well, but who now at the level I'm at do I serve? So I was talking to a client/friend yesterday and I'm like, okay, so tell me about your vision. And he was going on about his vision and it had to do with, this is his vision. So I'm not going to like necessarily lay it out in this crystal clarity. And he wants to work with people with like in mobility and recovery with, and so I said, well, who's it for? And he was saying like, okay, well, it's really anyone who wants to improve their mobility and their recovery rate and their health of their joints. Okay, so this is what happens, right? Because you're so good at what you do, you realize you can help pretty much anyone, right? I know that anyone who walks into my class, I don't care what level you are in meditation or yoga, I can help you. Now, then, so we get confused between the what, but who do I want to work with, right? So he's like, yeah, so anybody. I'm like, okay. So if a newbie beginner walked in or wanted to work with you, like not much experience athletically, doesn't know much about the fitness world, and a high-level athlete, right, came in and had a certain injury and it was very similar to what you were working through with your knee, which one would you like to work with? And right away he was like, well, yeah, of course, the high-level athlete, right? So don't confuse your what, because you're really good at that. And of course, we want to talk about that because we're really good at that, to your who. This is back to that question, your dreamiest clients. You have evolved, so guess what? Your clients have evolved, right? And I'm not saying, like sometimes some people love working with the beginners, and if that's like your thing, then great. But this is just an example of getting clear on the who, right? So when I asked him, he was very clear on like, oh yeah, no, definitely the high level athlete. Okay, so that's his dreamiest client. And of course, if you were to work with me, we'd really develop understanding, their pains, really understanding their symptoms, really understanding what is it they want. And we're drawing it out of you because you already know, but maybe you haven't like distilled it down. Just like my client yesterday was like saying it, and he was saying it more from this general place, not realizing, wait a minute, there's a lot of specific things that I would want to teach in this very specific path, right? So don't confuse your what with your who, and understand and start to ask yourself, out of those who's, who is your dreamiest client? Okay, and you have them already, and maybe they're not everyone, maybe it's a few small percentage, but you have them. So why don't we expand there, right? Because I think what happens is the scarcity mentality and the survival is like, but oh, there's all these people and they're all coming to me and they're validating me, right? But deep down, if you knew, I want you to imagine that now you start to shift to everyone that you teach to like, wow, imagine you only taught those dreamiest clients. Okay, really just take a moment. What would happen to your energy level? What would happen to your creative genius, right? Because when we work with things that like, it's not like, okay, I can kind of teach this like the back of my hand, but like, ooh, there's a lot of things I know, but there's a lot of things that kind of I want to develop, and I want to nuance, and I want to really like study, because as healers and people that offer transformation, we love the study, we love it. We're never going to stop being the student. So that's okay. But in that process, right, even though we're still a student, we can, still have mastery. Okay? Just because you are a student of something doesn't mean you don't have mastery. Okay? Please lean in on this one, because so many experts, for some reason, have this thing where it's like, well, until I get to this level, then I can finally work with those people, right? But guess what? You already have that mastery, right? You already have those assets. So, our job is to like start to distill, what are those assets? What are those things that you would love to share with your dreamiest clients?